Uh, and, I wasn't ready. Were you ready? I wasn't ready. Well, hey, everybody. This is Kenny
Kenny squared.
and this is the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And so, Kenny, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's funny to do this in the morning. This is the first time we've done it in the morning, right?
I know. Our schedules have gotten so busy. We're trying to squeeze some time in here. Unlike everybody else that has started school, and it's just been it's been crazy. It's been hectic, but glad we're able to find at least some time here. So I guess here's where we have to start. Well, let me start here first, and then we'll get to baseball because you're in Cleveland. Listen, I didn't get to see. I saw that game in and out because we were out. You watched the whole game. Big, huge. I love that. Big, huge four. To me, there's still Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. To me, little old school. There's still nothing like a huge 4 o'clock. It's 4:30 now, right? Big 4:30 matchup. Two big teams. Opening day. The Browns and the Chiefs. I did see the highlights. The Chiefs are just so good. And boy, oh boy, just those mistakes, man. I think my take from not watching the game is that the Browns have to learn how to close games out and learn how, especially a big game like that. What's the take? What take did you have, and what's the take there in Cleveland on just that incredible opening day game between the Browns and the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it right there because like the Browns controlled that game for about 3.5 quarters. They didn't play that well in the second half, but still like they were controlling the time of possession. Their defense was doing really good and just like holding Patrick Mahomes to field goals as opposed to touchdowns. I don't know. Like to me, I look at kind of what was the turning point was the botched snap with the punt.
Yeah, saw
because
that.
once you gave Mahomes the ball on with like a 15-yard field, like you knew it was over. Because like with other teams, like next week they play the Texans, you could get away with something like that. You could get away with like bad play against like a Cincinnati team or maybe even Pittsburgh, although Pittsburgh's defense looked really good. But you can't get away with that with the Chiefs. You give them an opening, they're going to run with it. Yeah. I think, the Browns specifically in general have to like learn how to close games better. Kevin Stefanski played like great game, but made a few mistakes at the end. And then Baker Mayfield, there's still going to be that question. Like, I think he could still carry this team, but a lot of people are looking at, well, he threw a really bad pick again right at the end of the game. But it's like one of those wins, kind of, or one of those losses, kind of like the Cowboys, where, yes, it was a loss, but it also kind of shows like, hey, the Browns can go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. So they look like a pretty good team. Really, I think a big test will be next week. Because while Houston is still a team that has a lot of weird issues, Tyrod Taylor, I don't know if you saw some of his stuff. He looked really good.
Yeah.
So if they can shut them down, then I think everyone, because if they go, it's going to start panic time. Let's hope that I get there.
Yeah. Taylor's an interesting player, to your point. Let me ask you this last question. We'll jump over to baseball, come back to football. What's the mood like? Is it same old Browns, or is it optimism? Hey, one game. If not for these couple of errors at the end of the game, we probably would have had it. Is there optimism there in Cleveland, or is it just, oh man, same old Browns?
Oddly, I think it's kind of a combination of both. Like, oh, of course, because the Browns have done an opening day game since I believe 2004. It's been a while.
Wow.
So, so I think it's kind of like, oh well, yeah, of course the Browns are going to start out like this. But I think also maybe kind of still that idea that that this team is still pretty good. I mean, I think it's like, oh yeah, we could have beaten the Chiefs, but it's like, oh well, it's still the Chiefs, you know.
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
still a lot of people consider them the favorite to win the whole thing. So
Okay. All right. We'll come back to the rest of the opening weekend, which I think was a great opening weekend for the NFL. Let's get back to the pennant races here in baseball. Again, great time of year. And obviously I thought baseball got it right. You and I were texting about this, although I'm not sure why these games were so long. It just was crazy. I think the opening ceremony, and then I'm not sure, I guess because of the NFL, they started the Sunday night game at 8 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, which they've been doing the last few years. Mets Yankees postseason feel over the weekend. Give us your hot takes on Mets Yankees. That goodwill went out of the window fast, right? All them hugging each other on Saturday to getting ready to throw some punches on Sunday. That was funny. But give us your take on this Yankee series and where you think the Yankees are at.
well, I think also, well, first of all, the Yankees pitching still kind of scares me a little bit. Chad Green, who's been good all year, seems like he's a little bit tired. He's also hit a season or career high in innings pitched, which to me also kind of raises a bit of a red flag. Gave up, I believe he gave up a home run yesterday too. No, he didn't give up a home run yesterday, but he gave up the big home run to Lindor, or the third big home run to Lindor. But also looking between yesterday and this past series, I feel like we got to give more love to Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
He had a huge home run on that Saturday night game. And also hit a big 3-run home yesterday in the makeup game with Minnesota. Bizarre game. The Twins lost their starter in the first inning due to injury, and then game went 10 innings. So that's never fun. And also they had plane issues, but anyway, getting back to the Subway Series, I would say that this series was probably the most juice that we've seen in a Yankees Mets series probably since like the early 2000s.
It's been a while. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, like, because a lot of them, it's like, for us, it's always fun. But like, it kind of seems like it's, oh, well, it's just another team. But like, I know a lot of the weird issues between Mike Piazza and Roger Clemens weren't great, whether it's beating him in the head or throwing the shattered bat at him. But like, it made things very interesting. And also, obviously, playing in the World Series and all. But like, I feel like there was a lot more juice. I'm still a little worried about the Yankees, but I feel like they might kind of turn the corner here. It seems like they also have a really good schedule over these next few weeks. They play Baltimore, then Cleveland, then Texas. So in reality, like, and then they finish off the season with Toronto, Boston, and Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay series is the last series of the year. It's probably not going to mean that much, but that Boston-Toronto week is going to be huge.
Wow. That's going to be fun.
But they need to have momentum into it. But I think like it looks like the Yankees seem to be improving with the bat. Joey Gallo seems to be hitting a little bit better finally. I had texted you yesterday about this. There's a few things that I kind of see with this Yankee team moving forward. First of all, Gleyber Torres, they've said, is not going to play shortstop probably the rest of the year, which to me is a good move. He's second in the league in errors. He kind of looks lost at the plate, and it's probably because of his fielding. So they've moved him to second base. I think it's the right move. Honestly, I think he's probably a guy that has 1 foot out the door in New York, especially when you have free agents such as Trevor Story, possibly Corey Seager, Carlos Correa. I think the Yankees will probably look to try to get one of those guys and then trade Torres. I'd also said my bold prediction is probably the whole infield is going to be different next year, as opposed to the start of this season. Luke Voight, I don't know why the Yankees seem to hate him, but he's really good. He hit 20. He led the league in home runs last year, and it seems like they don't want to play him. He played yesterday. He was okay, but like, to me, this is a guy that should be in the lineup every day. I understand not playing him over Rizzo at first base because Rizzo is a much better defensive first baseman, but that guy should be DHing. Stanton does better hitting when he's playing in the outfield too. So you might as well just have Voight as your regular DH. But yeah, I think these next couple weeks will kind of decide the Yankee season. Like, you can't be losing 2 out of 3 to Baltimore or 2 out of 3 to Cleveland. Like, these are teams you got to beat.
Yeah. So I probably didn't say this strong enough yesterday. I'm not trading Gleyber Torres. Unless I'm getting a really top frontline pitcher back for him. I just think you got to give him a little bit more time. How old is he? Like 23, something like that. And I mean,
yeah,
he was a top prospect. He had a great year a couple of years ago, right? Wasn't 2018 was the year that he had just this phenomenal year. I don't think now Gary Sanchez, I'm first ticket out of town. I'm sorry. And I know we're positive tip, but I've seen enough of him. That tag on non-tag on Jonathan VR, that turned that game around. Yep. I didn't understand why he moved out of the way. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. But and I just don't think he's a very good player, and I've seen enough of him. But I feel the same way with Voight. Especially if they bring Rizzo back, they may not have a choice but to trade him, right? But if they don't bring Rizzo back, I'm sticking him in there every day, and he's going to hit me probably in a full season, 30 home runs, probably knock in 80, 90 RBIs. And he's decent in the field. He's not going to hurt you. He's sort of like Pete Alonso. But Torres he's a special player. I wouldn't give up on him yet. Again, now if you sign a Trevor Story, then okay. But I'm not advertising that because I think that there's teams out there that will salivate at getting Torres, especially since he's probably still got a few years of free agency, to go. There's some rebuilding teams that'll probably give up a frontline starter or a big starting prospect for him. Then I would consider it, but I like him. I think that he's going to come back around. One of the things that in that, I'm not sure why Lindor chose to kind of pick on him as he ran around the bases that led to that whole bench clearing thing on Sunday night. But one of the things is that Torres, he ran out there, man. He got right in Lindor's face, and I guess that was, because he had said something on the way around. I think the Yankees will get in. I really do. Let me ask you this question. Are you surprised that the Blue Jays have stayed hot? I mean, Guerrero, unbelievable. I think you've got to now put him almost ahead of Ohtani for MVP, especially if he wins the Triple Crown. But are you surprised that the Blue Jays have hung in this long? And I mean, they're more than hanging in. They're just like tearing it up. And it's been a couple of weeks now.
Yeah, well, remember a couple of weeks ago when I said that I'm pretty sure that they're just going to be like the team that kind of gets in the way. I didn't think that they would get this much in the way. But yeah, I texted you this yesterday too. I think that you really have to start considering Guerrero for the MVP. Right now, he leads all of baseball in home runs with 45. He's second in the American League in batting average behind, I believe it's Marcus Semien. And then he also, let's see here. And then he's also third in RBIs. Starling Marte leads in batting average, which to me is kind of unfair because he wasn't.
That was a big. I'm going to talk about those trade deadline pickups in my interesting back later. Marte was just a brilliant pickup, even though the A's have faltered here a little bit. But Marcus Semien has got to be in the MVP talk as well. What a year this guy has had. So you broke it down. What's your final take on Mets Yankees this past weekend? Any other things stood out to you? What did the 9/11 ceremony? I thought was well done. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love the 9/11 ceremony. I think it was done really well. I think that baseball sometimes misses opportunities like this, and I don't think they missed, which I think is really good. I really liked how the players, the Yankees and Mets kind of were like intertwined and all buddy buddy. Of course, that went out the window once Lindor thought he heard whistling, but it was, I think, a cool ceremony in general. The whole whistling thing I think is interesting. I watched a video about it, and it's a guy who likes to break down stuff anyway, and like there didn't seem to be a distinct pattern of the whistling, like kind of unlike with like say the Astros where it was like, oh, they bang on the trash can if it was an off pitch. Like it seemed like the whistling was just happening everywhere. Yeah. So I don't know if it's just the paranoia, but also like Taijuan Walker, I didn't realize was so bad in like the second half.
Yeah.
And also Carlos Carrasco has been horrible in the first inning. So like a lot of that stuff to me isn't necessarily like a whistling thing. It just seems like that's how the Mets pitchers are. I still think they got a shot at the division, but it's going to be, the race is going to be interesting this year.
Yeah, I listen, I think baseball players just in general are very sensitive on stuff like that. You know, baseball players can get angry on just the silliest things. I mean, the whistling thing, I mean, so what? You know, listen, the fact is Walker's had some good outings here over the last, month or so, but his last two weren't that good. Listen, without DeGrom, it's been just very difficult. And Carrasco, I don't know what it is in the first inning with him, but he's excellent after. And as you saw on Sunday night, he's been great after. So if they get him through the first inning, I mean, he's a solid pitcher. I can't wait for him to have a full healthy year next year. I'll just give my quick take on the Mets here. I mean, they're back to one game under 500. It's, and I know as Mets fans, we're holding on to that last series, if we're 3 games out and we go in with the Braves, we have 3 games with the Braves. That would be so hard for them to sweep the Braves, on the final weekend of the season. It's just hard to take. And part of me goes back to 1973 when, they won the division, got to the World Series, only 3 games over 500 for the year. But this doesn't feel like that type of year. I think the Braves are too good. I think the Braves have their faltering, and I think they're just going to go on a run here. The Phillies have faltered as well. And, Mets Phillies this weekend, I mean, they're going to kind of knock each other out of the race one way or the other, So I always have hope as a fan, but it just doesn't feel, I mean, it's just been so much that has gone against the Mets, their way, gone against them this year, hasn't gone their way. The DeGrom one to me has been the big one because you've seen Walker. Marcus Stroman has been outstanding all year long. I know he has a losing record, but he's got an under 3 ERA. I think he's like 2.80. He's just been fantastic, so you got to bring him back, I think, next year. And he's a New York guy, so it'd be great to bring him back. But, we could talk about postseason moves later, but I don't know. It's hard for me to see them in the playoffs this year. So, hey, can I go out of order here? Can I give you my fun fact real quick because it ties in with this, and then we'll jump to football?
Go for it.
I read an article called "The Last Great Pennant Race," and they talked about 1993. And you've heard me talk about this before. The 1993, because the next year is when they split the divisions up, and we had the wild card, which we like, right? But you go back pre-1969, you could have had a great year, won 95, 96 as the Giants. We saw that a few times in the 60s, and they just didn't get in because the Cardinals or somebody else or the Dodgers just beat them by a couple of games. Well, 1993, the Braves were still in the Western Division, and I want to talk real quick about their race with the Giants. And it was really unbelievable. It just captivated, not just baseball, but I mean, news led with this pennant race because, the Braves had already been, to the World Series a couple of times. They were really just fighting to get back there. They wound up losing in the playoffs, by the way, that year to the Phillies in the championship series. So they didn't get to the World Series. But I'll cut to the chase. the Braves, their record was 104-58. The Giants' record was 103-59. And so,
Wow.
just a little bit of background on there. Big offseason acquisitions for both teams. The Braves signed Greg Maddux, obviously Hall of Famer, went on to win the Cy Young that year. And the Giants signed Mr. Barry Bonds, who went on to win the MVP that year at a great, great year. And he carried the Giants. And the Giants had a pretty good-sized year. The Braves faltered in the first half. Giants had a pretty decent lead, 6-7 games. And then the Braves just caught fire. So speaking of mid-season acquisitions, they picked up slugging Fred McGriff from the Padres. And I want you to just put this in perspective, Kenny. Before they got Fred McGriff, their record was 53-41. After they got Fred McGriff, their record was 51-17. 51-17. I mean, he just went on a tear. The Braves went on a tear. The Giants were still obviously winning. They faltered a little bit in August. They were up by 2 games. They had a big 4-game series in San Francisco in late August. The Braves went into San Francisco and swept all 4 games. And they stayed in first place. Going into the last weekend of the season, they had identical records with ties. The Braves had a 3-game series against the Rockies, the expansion Rockies. That was their first year. Giants had a 3-game series against their hated rivals, the Dodgers. But they both take care of business on Friday and Saturday. They both win the game. So they go into the last day of the season tied. Braves early win their game against the Rockies. The Giants, obviously, the game is a little bit later in the afternoon. Dodgers are like, we're not having it. The Dodgers smoke them. They score. The Giants had no choice but to pitch. Because that was the other thing. They kind of messed up their pitching rotation, and they had to pitch 21-year-old rookie Solomon Torres, who turned out to be a pretty decent pitcher. But they had to pitch him on the last game, and the Dodgers just smoked him in the first inning, second inning. The Dodgers wound up winning that game 12-1. The last game of the season, so a little anticlimactic because everybody was looking at, hey, this is going to be a one-game playoff with these 2 teams, But it didn't happen. The Braves took care of business, swept the Rockies that weekend. Giants lost in the last game of the season, and to me, that was, in my lifetime, probably the best pennant race that I saw between the 2 teams. It was just unbelievable in September. When one would lose, the other would lose. When one would win, the other would win. I mean, they spent most of the month of September tied, and they just dominated. They were both just great teams. And it was a shame to see the Giants go home. But that was the main reason. That was such a big season. That was the main reason why Bud Selig kind of, gathered everybody together at the end of the year. He said, we can't have this. We can't have a team with 103 wins going home. Thus, the realignment and they had been talking about the wild card for a few years before that, and that's why they put it in. So you'll never see a team that has, just like the Giants and Dodgers this year, both of them might win 100 games. They'll both be in the playoffs, One of them's not going home, which, okay, I get that. But that to me was just the last great pennant race. Anyway, anxious to hear yours in a little bit. Let's get to the NFL. What was that? So we talked already about Browns and Chiefs. What were some other big takeaways for you from week 1? Talk about your Giants maybe for a little bit.
I didn't really, obviously here it's hard to watch the Giants games, but following it a little bit, it just kind of seems like they're just kind of like a bland team right now. Saquon Barkley doesn't look like he's back. I don't know if Daniel Jones is the answer at quarterback. I don't know. I've heard this before. I think I might have said it before. Kind of seems like this is like the year for Daniel Jones to prove that he has to. He's the guy.
Yeah, I agree. He has to.
Like he's got the weapons, so he doesn't really have many excuses here. But also it is the first game back for Saquon Barkley. Probably take him a couple of weeks to kind of get his feet under him. Something else, I guess, going back to the Browns real quick. Odell didn't play on Sunday. Still recovering from the ACL tear. So I wonder if he would have made a difference. But anyway, I don't really have much to say about the Giants. It seems like, I don't know. I had a little bit of hope going in. Maybe like this might be a good year for them. but they just looked absolutely flat against the Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater's okay, but he's not great. So it doesn't really get me that excited about them. But I guess we'll see. It is only week 1, so I guess it doesn't hurt to not overreact. But every once in a while, you get one of those teams that like was really bad one year, and then all of a sudden, like, it's fighting for the division at the end of the year. I was hoping that team would be the Giants, but if it's not, no big deal. But I think one of the bigger takeaways for me, what in the world is going on with Aaron Rodgers?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Like, you could argue that he had one of the worst, like he had the worst performance of his career. Part of me is saying that maybe what he's doing is pulling a James Harden, like playing so nonchalantly, I don't care, so that the Packers have to trade me, which to me would be bad. And also it would look bad for me calling the Packers my Super Bowl pick. But it is.
I was waiting for you to say that. I don't know. I know that there's some things there that that probably the public, to his credit, are not going to know about. You just get a sense that he doesn't want to be there. But it's, like he said, it's one game. He was offended that the coach said it was embarrassing. You could tell he was offended by that. I want to give credit, though, to the Saints and Jameis Winston. I think that he's a guy that, very quietly when Tampa, let him walk, he didn't complain or anything like that. It's a smart move going to New Orleans, even though they had a good backup there already. And I think listen, I think he's going to have a great year. I really do. I mean, because he's got more weapons than he ever had. And he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be great, but he's very good. And but I didn't see that game except the highlights. And wow, New Orleans is not that much better than the Packers. I mean, just come on, 38-3. I mean, come on, that was just What were your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer's debut?
Kind of the same. It seemed like it was okay. I actually read that Trevor Lawrence, that's the first time between high school and college that he's ever lost a game. So, like, he's a guy that's not used to losing. But I think especially for a team like Jacksonville that doesn't have a ton of weapons, their division is kind of in flux a little bit. I mean, the Titans look like they'll be good. The Colts, I'm still kind of high on the Colts. I know Nate is too. I'm sure Nate's probably listening here. So, yeah. But I do think that it's going to take a little bit of time for Jacksonville to kind of figure things out. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Out of all of like the rookie quarterbacks started, it seemed like Trevor Lawrence looked probably the best. Zach Wilson had a really good second half. I know Justin Fields was kind of in and out. Honestly, to me, I would just start Justin Fields. I mean, Andy Dalton's not the future of the Bears, but that's
I agree. Agree.
But I think he looked pretty good.
Yeah, I like how Matthew Stafford looked. So remember, I picked the Rams to win the NFC. So I like their start. You know who I think was under the radar here, and I'm not sure what to make of the Vikings, whether they're going to be good or mediocre or not so good. But I thought the Bengals looked pretty good. I know it's the first game, but they always lose like their opener usually. And Burrow has got his old receiver with him. And they tore it up, so it's good. This was a year where all of these big receivers that we saw in college last year are in the NFL now. The guys from Alabama, the guys from Clemson, the guys from LSU, some of these just unbelievable receivers that are playing the NFL now. It'll be fun to watch, and the one for the Bengals, he was, he had a big opening game. I think that's such an advantage, right? If you played, for 2-3 years in college together and then you're back together in the NFL, that's such an advantage. And I think that hurts Jacksonville, right? Because I think their guy got hurt and I think is out for the season, But so I thought that it was a fun opening. There was a lot of games that went down to the wire. I thought the Dallas, listen, I was wrong about Dallas. They didn't get smoked. They played very well against Tampa, but I mean, Tom Brady, at 44 years old, I mean, you're gonna run out of words for him this year. I don't even know what to say about the guy anymore. So and they've gotten, I think, even better. Tampa Bay, Antonio Brown, they'll have him for the whole year. He looks like he's like 5 years younger. So because he hasn't played much the last couple of years, is probably why. All right. Anything else from week one?
No, I think you kind of nailed it there. It was a lot of really fun and tight games. I mean, I know the Browns didn't win, but that was still an exciting game. Also, we were kind of flipping back and forth because here they had the Steelers and Bills on, which that was kind of a weird game.
Yeah.
And then also the Minnesota Cincinnati game.
Yeah.
And we were watching that like, oh wow, like Kirk Cousins actually threw a good ball there.
Yeah.
And then of course we turned from that afterwards because the Browns were on. But it was quite the exciting game.
It was. I think the other I thought I read an interesting fact about the Bengals-Vikings game, that was the first game since 1974 that went through overtime and was tied, and the Bengals obviously won it with no time on the clock. I think it was the first time since 1974, the first year that they actually put in overtime. There used to be a lot of ties in the NFL when I was a little kid, because they didn't have overtime. Except in the playoffs, they had overtime. All right, it's fun fact time. So let me hear how many fun facts you have, one or two, because I have one more about the NFL.
I have kind of two with your boy Javi Baez, and then also a football one.
Okay, go ahead.
So let me start with the football one, since we were just talking about football. Now head coach of the Titans, Mike Vrabel, had a very interesting NFL career. He had only 12 receptions throughout his career. Every single one of them went for a touchdown. So wow. 12 for 12.
Wow. Well, he was a defensive guy. They used to bring him in, when they were like at the 2-3 yard line, and, he would line up and he'd be a receiver. I didn't realize he had that many. He had 12, and all of them were touchdowns. That is amazing. I had no clue. I remember when he used to do that, but man, oh man. All right, I'll give you my football one, and then you can end with Javi Baez. The Raiders win last night was spectacular. That was a great comeback. I mean, watching the first half, I thought the Ravens should have been up. They lost a couple of opportunities there, and that certainly hurt them as the Raiders came back, because I thought that while Lamar Jackson played well, I thought the Raiders were boxing him up a little bit. But the best opening day was in 1976 for me. And I've told you this before, through the 70s, there was no rivalry better than the Raiders and the Steelers. They just battled it out every year. They were by far the two best teams in the AFC back then, and they hated each other. And the opening game, and I'm going to send you a YouTube link that has like a 20-minute kind of with Kurt Gowdy doing the play-by-play. It's sort of like Joe Buck now or Jim Nantz. If you turn it on and those guys are doing a big 4 o'clock game, it's a huge game. But the Raiders and Steelers, we were like, man, why are they putting that on opening day? I mean, this should be like a late December or November game. And it was funny, the Steelers would always beat the Raiders in the playoffs, and the Raiders would always beat the Steelers in the regular season, and this was no different. The Steelers took a 28-14 lead into the fourth quarter, and the Raiders came back and won 31-28, which was amazing. Terry Bradshaw fumbled, deep in his own territory, and they had a rookie kicker that came in and kicked the field goal to win the game. But the real backstory were the terrible hits on Lynn Swann. They knocked him out. Back then it was legal to kind of do this forearm around the head, and the Raiders were nasty back then defensively. But so were the Steelers. The Steelers, had Jack Lambert, Mean Joe Green, and Mel Blount, and Lynn Swann pressed charges against the Raiders. It didn't go anywhere. Like, he wanted the Raiders arrested for assault because he wound up with a concussion, was out for several games that year. But what he wound up suing the Raiders, and it was actually a court case. And I probably talked about this before. If that had happened today, that would have been huge news. They would have had a court case on TV. But when Chuck Noll, which is why Chuck Noll and Terry Bradshaw never had a great relationship, nor did he have a great relationship with some of his players. He's a Hall of Fame coach, phenomenal. And he passed away a couple of years ago now. But when he had to testify under oath, I mean, this actually went to trial and everything. The lawyer asked him something to the effect as, is there a criminal element in the NFL? And he said, yes. And he said, well, can you name some of the criminals in the NFL? And he named Jack Tatum, George Atkinson, and some of the Raiders, Ted Hendricks. And he said, well, what about your team? And he said, well, Jack Lambert, Mel Blount, Donnie Shaw. He named his own players and said that they were criminals. Wow. They played. They never forgave him for that, and I forgot how it wound up. I think they threw the case out, if I'm not mistaken. But Lynn Swann made his point, and a lot of it led to a lot of rule changes. And obviously Lynn Swann, Hall of Fame wide receiver. But that game was where there were just nasty hits. I mean, there's a play where they slap Franco Harris when he's out of bounds, and the referee misses it. And the Steelers go crazy. But to me, that was the most tense. And you'll see the crowd into it. You'll see the announcers into it. I'll send you that link later on. But Raiders Steelers, 1976, long time ago. I was a young pup, but man, I remember that game like it was yesterday. All right, what's your hot take? Your interesting fact on Javi Baez? I'm almost afraid to ask.
Well, the first one is actually one that you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. The second one, I think, is one of those more fun, like, whoa, that's kind of a weird thing. So first, Juan Soto has more intentional walks in the last 2 seasons than Javi Baez has regular walks.
Oh.
Juan Soto has 29 intentional walks. Javi Baez has 28 regular walks. Oh. So that's kind of interesting. It shows you he doesn't much. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a horrible stat. 29 intentional walks, and Juan Soto is. We never really talk much about him. He's just a phenomenal young player. The play discipline that he has is just spectacular. It's just the opposite of my guy Baez, who is an excellent player in some other ways. But anyway, that is a crazy stat. I had no idea. Wow.
So yeah, that's a weird one. But this is weirder because, as you know, a couple weeks ago, the Mets resumed the makeup of a suspended game against the Marlins.
Yeah.
So, suspended games are always weird because technically, even though the game was finished on August 31st, all the stats are still technically considered April 11th. So, as a result of that, Javi Baez became the 3rd player in Major League history to have a hit with 2 different teams on the same day.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Actually, the first one was back in 1922. The Cardinals and Cubs made a trade in between a doubleheader. So like the guy went from one team to the other. The other one, where the Mets, Joel Youngblood.
Okay. Yeah.
He got traded and then played for the same team later on in the day.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird one because, like, technically, yes, he, like, according to the record books, he has a hit 2 different teams, but also that wasn't the only weird thing with the suspended game. There was a player that made his Major League debut on August 31st, but also now technically on April 11th for the Marlins. So, like, he had really made his debut in June, but then came into the game because half the Marlins lineup was gone via trade. So suspended games always bring weird stats.
Yeah. That was so odd. And they technically, I think the Mets had like a 7 or 8 game winning streak, but they technically had it as a 7-game winning streak because they didn't count the game that they won. That was that was really, really weird. It was weird that they started that game back in April. It was pouring rain. It was the forecast is not supposed to let up for several hours, and they still started the game. It was really odd. That was a good one. I love that. Those are some great stats. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. Penny, I'm going to put the music on behind our podcast. Take us home.
All righty. Oh, also, fun fact, the Giants clinched a playoff spot yesterday, so congrats to them.
Yeah.
Hopefully the Yankees and Mets can too, but in the meantime, this is Kenny Squared End.
Kenny.
With sports on the positive tip. Morning edition. We'll see you guys next week.
Yes, we'll see you next week.